Srimad Bhagavatam, 4th Canto, The Creation of the Fourth Order, Part 1, Chapters 1 through 19. Translation and elaborate purports by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Founder Acharya of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Chapter 1, Genealogical Table of the Daughters of Manu. Text 1. Sri Maitreya said, Svayambhuva Manu begot 3 daughters in his wife Satarupa, and their names were Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. Purport. First of all, let us offer our respectful obeisances unto our spiritual master, Om Sri Vishnupada Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Saraswati Goswami Prabhupada, by whose order I am engaged in this Herculean task of writing commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam as the Bhaktivedanta purports. By his grace we have finished 3 cantos already, and we are just trying to begin the 4th canto. By his divine grace, let us offer our respectful obeisances unto Lord Chaitanya, who began this Krishna consciousness movement of Bhagavata Dharma 500 years ago, and through his grace let us offer our obeisances to the 6 Goswamis, and then let us offer our obeisances to Radha and Krishna, the spiritual couple who enjoy eternally in Vrindavana with their cowherd boys and damsels in Vrajabhumi. Let us also offer our respectful obeisances to all the devotees and eternal servitors of the Supreme Lord. In this 4th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, there are 31 chapters, and all these chapters describe the secondary creation by Brahma and the Manus. The Supreme Lord himself does the real creation by agitating his material energy, and then by his order, Brahma, the first living creature in the universe, attempts to create the different planetary systems and their inhabitants, expanding the population through his progeny, like Manu and other progenitors of living entities, who work perpetually under the order of the Supreme Lord. In the first chapter of this 4th canto, there are descriptions of the 3 daughters of Svayambhuva Manu and their descendants. The next 6 chapters describe the sacrifice performed by King Daksha and how it was spoiled. Thereafter, the activities of Maharaja Dhruva are described in 5 chapters. Then, in 11 chapters, the activities of King Pirthu are described, and the next 8 chapters are devoted to the activities of the Pracheta kings. As described in the first verse of this chapter, Svayambhuva Manu had 3 daughters, named Akuti, Devahuti, and Prasuti. Of these 3 daughters, one daughter, Devahuti, has already been described, along with her husband, Kardama Muni, and her son, Kapila Muni. In this chapter, the descendants of the first daughter, Akuti, will specifically be described. Svayambhuva Manu was the son of Brahma. Brahma had many other sons, but Manu's name is specifically mentioned first because he was a great devotee of the Lord. In this verse there is also the word Cha, indicating that besides the 3 daughters mentioned, Svayambhuva Manu also had 2 sons. Text 2. Akuti had 2 daughters, but in spite of her brothers, King Svayambhuva Manu handed her over to Prajapati Ruchi on the condition that the son born of her be returned to Manu as his son. This he did in consultation with his wife Satarupa. Purport. Sometimes a sonless person offers his daughter to a husband on the condition that his grandson be returned to him to be adopted as his son and inherit his property. This is called Putrika Dharma, which means that by execution of religious rituals one gets a son, although one is sonless by one's own wife. But here we see extraordinary behavior in Manu, for in spite of his having 2 sons, he handed over his first daughter to Prajapati Ruchi on the condition that the son born of his daughter be returned to him as his son. Srila Vishwanatha Chakravarti Thakura comments on this connection that King Manu knew that the Supreme Personality of Godhead would take birth in the womb of Akuti. Therefore, in spite of having 2 sons, he wanted the particular son born of Akuti because he was ambitious to have the Supreme Personality of Godhead appear as his son and grandson. Manu is the lawgiver of mankind, and since he personally executed the Putrika Dharma, we may accept that such a system may be adopted by mankind also. Thus, even though one has a son, If one wants to have a particular son from one's daughter, one may give one's daughter in charity on that condition. That is the opinion of Srila Jiva Goswami. Text 3. Ruchi, who was very powerful in his Brahmanical qualifications, and was appointed one of the progenitors of the living entities, begot one son and one daughter by his wife Akuti. Purport. The word Brahma Varchasvi is very significant. Ruchi was a Brahmana, and he executed the Brahminical duties very rigidly. As stated in Bhagavad Gita, the Brahminical qualifications are control of the senses, control of the mind, cleanliness within and without, development of spiritual and material knowledge, simplicity, truthfulness, faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead, etc. There are many qualities which indicate a Brahminical personality, and it is understood that Ruchi followed all the Brahminical principles rigidly. Therefore he is specifically mentioned as Brahma Varchasvi. One who is born of a Brahmana father, but does not act as a Brahmana, is called, in Vedic language, a Brahma Bandhu, and is calculated to be on the level of Sudras and women. Thus, in the Bhagavatam, we find that Mahabharata was specifically compiled by Vyasadeva for Stri Sudra Brahma Bandhu. Stri means women, Sudra means the lower class of civilized human society, and Brahma Bandhu means persons who are born in the families of Brahmanas, but do not follow the rules and regulations carefully. All of these three classes are called less intelligent. They have no access to the study of the Vedas, which are specifically meant for persons who have acquired the Brahminical qualifications. This restriction is based not upon any sectarian distinction, but upon qualification. The Vedic literatures cannot be understood unless one has developed the Brahminical qualifications. It is regrettable, therefore, that persons who have no Brahminical qualifications and have never trained under a bona fide spiritual master nevertheless comment on Vedic literatures like the Srimad Bhagavatam and other Puranas, for such persons cannot deliver their real message. Ruchi was considered a first-class Brahmana, therefore he is mentioned here as Brahma Varchasvi, one who had full prowess and Brahminical strength. Text 4. Of the two children born of Akuti, the male child was directly an incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and his name was Yajna, which is another name of Lord Vishnu. The female child was a partial incarnation of Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, the eternal consort of Lord Vishnu. Purport. Lakshmi, the goddess of fortune, is the eternal consort of Lord Vishnu. Here it is stated that both the Lord and Lakshmi, who are eternal consorts, appeared from Akuti simultaneously. Both the Lord and his consort are beyond this material creation, as confirmed by many authorities, Narayana Paro Vyaktat. Therefore their eternal relationship cannot be changed, and Yajna, the boy born of Akuti, later married the goddess of fortune. Text 5. Swayambhuva Manu very gladly brought home the beautiful boy named Yajna, and Ruchi, his son-in-law, kept with him the daughter Dakshina. Purport. Swayambhuva Manu was very glad to see that his daughter Akuti had given birth to both a boy and a girl. He was afraid that he would take one son, and that because of this his son-in-law Ruchi might be sorry. Thus when he heard that a daughter was born along with the boy, he was very glad. Ruchi, according to his promise, returned his male child to Swayambhuva Manu and decided to keep the daughter, whose name was Dakshina. One of Lord Vishnu's names is Yajna, because he is the master of the Vedas. The name Yajna comes from Yajasampati, which means Lord of all sacrifices. In the Yajurveda, there are different ritualistic descriptions for performing yajnas, and the beneficiary of all such yajnas is the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Therefore it is stated in Bhagavad Gita 3:9, Yajnatat karmana, one should act, but one should perform one's prescribed duties only for the sake of Yajna, or Vishnu. If one does not act for the satisfaction of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or if one does not perform devotional service, then there will be reactions to all one's activities. It does not matter if the reaction is good or bad. If our activities are not dovetailed with the desire of the Supreme Lord, or if we do not act in Krishna consciousness, then we shall be responsible for the results of all our activities. There is always a reaction to every kind of action, but if actions are performed for yajna, there is no reaction. Thus, if one acts for yajna, or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one is not entangled in the material condition, for it is mentioned in the Vedas and also in Bhagavad Gita that the Vedas and the Vedic rituals are all meant for understanding the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna. From the very beginning, one should try to act in Krishna consciousness. That will free one from the reactions of material activities. Text 6. The Lord of the ritualistic performance of yajna later married Dakshina, who was anxious to have the personality of Godhead as her husband, and in this wife the Lord was also very much pleased to beget 12 children. Purport. An ideal husband and wife are generally called Lakshmi Narayana to compare them to the Lord and the goddess of fortune, for it is significant that Lakshmi Narayana are forever happy as husband and wife. A wife should always remain satisfied with her husband, and a husband should always remain satisfied with his wife. In the Chanakya Sloka, the moral instructions of Chanakya Pandita, it is said that if a husband and wife are always satisfied with one another, then the goddess of fortune automatically comes. In other words, when there is no disagreement between husband and wife, all material opulence is present, and good children are born. Generally, according to Vedic civilization, the wife is trained to be satisfied in all conditions, and the husband, according to Vedic instruction, is required to please the wife with sufficient food, ornaments, and clothing. Then, if they are satisfied with their mutual dealings, good children are born. In this way, the entire world can become peaceful. But unfortunately, in this age of Kali, there are no ideal husbands and wives. Therefore, unwanted children are produced, and there is no peace and prosperity in the present-day world. Text 7. The 12 boys born of Yajna and Dakshina were named Tosha, Pratosha, Santosha, Bhadra, Santi, Idashpati, Idama, Kavi, Vibhu, Svana, Sudeva, and Rochana. Text 8. During the time of Swayambhava Manu, these sons all became the demigods, collectively named the Tusitas. Marichi became the head of the 7 rishis, and Yajna became the king of the demigods, Indra. Purport. During the life of Swayambhava Manu, 6 kinds of living entities were generated from the demigods known as the Tusitas, from the sages headed by Marichi, and from descendants of Yajna, king of the demigods, and all of them expanded their progeny to observe the order of the Lord, to fill the universe with living entities. These 6 kinds of living entities are known as Manus, Devas, Manuputras, Amsavataras, Suresvaras, and Rishis. Yajna, being the incarnation of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, became the leader of the demigods, Indra. Text 9. Swayambhava Manu's 2 sons, Priyavrata and Uttanapada, became very powerful kings, and their sons and grandsons spread all over the 3 worlds during that period. Text 10. My dear son, Swayambhava Manu handed over his very dear daughter Devahuti to Kardama Muni. I have already spoken to you about them, and you have heard about them almost in full. Text 11. Swayambhava Manu handed over his daughter Prasuti to the son of Brahma, named Daksha, who was also one of the progenitors of the living entities. The descendants of Daksha are spread throughout the 3 worlds. Text 12. You have already been informed about the 9 daughters of Kardama Muni, who were handed over to 9 different sages. I shall now describe the descendants of those 9 daughters. Please hear from me. Purport. The 3rd canto has already described how Kardama Muni begot 9 daughters in Devahuti, and how all the daughters were later handed over to great sages like Marichi, Atri, and Vasista. Text 13. Kardama Muni's daughter Kala, who was married to Marichi, gave birth to 2 children, whose names were Kasyapa and Purnima. Their descendants are spread all over the world. Text 14. My dear Vidura, of the 2 sons Kasyapa and Purnima, Purnima begot 3 children, namely Viraja, Visvaga, and Devakulya. Of these 3, Devakulya was the water which washed the lotus feet of the personality of Godhead, and which later on transformed into the Ganges of the heavenly planets. Purport. Of the two sons Kasyapa and Purnama, herein Purnama's descendants are described. An elaborate description of these descendants will be given in the 6th canto. It is also understood herein that Devakulya is the presiding deity of the river Ganges, which comes down from the heavenly planets to this planet and is accepted to be sanctified because it touched the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Hari. Text 15. Anasuya, the wife of Atri Muni, gave birth to 3 very famous sons, Soma, Dattatreya, and Durvasya, who were partial representations of Lord Vishnu, Lord Shiva, and Lord Brahma. Soma was a partial representation of Lord Brahma, Dattatreya was a partial representation of Lord Vishnu, and Durvasya was a partial representation of Lord Shiva. Purport. In this verse we find the words Atma Isha Brahma Sambhavan. Atma means the Supersoul, or Vishnu, Isha means Lord Shiva, and Brahma means the 4-headed Lord Brahma. The 3 sons born of Anusya, Dattatreya, Durvasya, and Soma were born as partial representations of these 3 demigods. Atma is not in the category of the demigods or living entities because he is Vishnu. Therefore he is described as Vibhinamsa Bhutanam. The Supersoul, Vishnu, is the seed-giving father of all living entities, including Brahma and Lord Shiva. Another meaning of the word Atma may be accepted in this way. The principle who is the Supersoul in every Atma, or one may say the soul of everyone, became manifested as Dattatreya, became the word Amsa, part and parcel is used here. In Bhagavad Gita, the individual souls are also described as parts of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, or Supersoul. So why not accept that Dattatreya was one of those parts? Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma are also described here as parts, so why not accept all of them as ordinary individual souls? The answer is that the manifestations of Vishnu and those of the ordinary living entities are certainly all parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord, and no one is equal to him. But among the parts and parcels there are different categories. In the Varaha Purana, it is nicely explained that some of the parts are Svamsa and some are Vibhinamsa. Vibhinamsa parts are called Jivas, and Svamsa parts are in the Vishnu category. In the Jiva category, the Vibhinamsa parts and parcels, there are also gradations. That is explained in the Vishnu Purana, where it is clearly stated that the individual parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord are subject to being covered by the external energy called illusion or Maya. Such individual parts and parcels, who can travel to any part of the Lord's creation, are called Sharvagata and are suffering the pangs of material existence. They are proportionately freed from the coverings of ignorance under material existence, according to different levels of work, and under different influences of the modes of material nature. For example, the sufferings of jivas situated in the mode of goodness are less than those of jivas situated in the mode of ignorance. Pure Krishna consciousness, however, is the birthright of all living entities, because every living entity is part and parcel of the Supreme Lord. The consciousness of the Lord is also in the part and parcel, and according to the proportion to which that consciousness is cleared of material dirt, the living entities are differently situated. In the Vedanta Sutra, the living entities of different gradations are compared to candles or lamps with different candle power. For example, some electric bulbs have the power of 1,000 candles, some have the power of 500 candles, and some the power of 100 candles, some 50 candles, etc. But all the electric bulbs have light. Light is present in every bulb, but the gradations of light are different. Similarly, there are gradations of Brahman. The Vishnu Svamsa expansions of the Supreme Lord in different Vishnu forms are like lamps. Lord Shiva is also like a lamp, and the supreme candle power, or the 100% light, is Krishna. The Vishnu Tattva has 94%, the Shiva Tattva has 84%, Lord Brahma has 78%, and the living entities are also like Brahma, but in the conditioned state their power is still more dim. There are gradations of Brahman, and no one can deny this fact. Therefore the words Atmesha Brahma Sambhavam indicate that Dattatreya was directly part and parcel of Vishnu, whereas Durvasha and Soma were parts and parcels of Lord Shiva and Lord Brahma. Text 16. After hearing this, Vidura inquired from Maitreya, "My dear master, how is it that the three deities, Brahma, Vishnu, and Shiva, who are the creator, maintainer, and destroyer of the whole creation, became the offspring of the wife of Atri Muni?" Purport. The inquisitiveness of Vidura was quite fitting, for he understood that when the Supersoul, Lord Brahma, and Lord Shiva all appeared through the person of Anusya, the wife of Atri Muni, there must have been some great purpose. Otherwise, why should they have appeared in such a way? Text 17. Maitreya said, when Lord Brahma ordered Atri Muni to create generations after marrying Anusya, Atri Muni and his wife went to perform severe austerities in the valley of the mountain known as Riksha. Text 18. In that mountain valley flows a river named Nirvindya. On the bank of the river are many ashoka trees and other plants full of palasha flowers, and there is always the sweet sound of water flowing from a waterfall. The husband and wife reached that beautiful place. Text 19. There the great sage concentrated his mind by the yogic breathing exercises, and thereby controlling all attachment, he remained standing on one leg only, eating nothing but air, and stood there on one leg for 100 years. Text 20. He was thinking, "May the Lord of the universe, of whom I have taken shelter, kindly be pleased to offer me a son exactly like him." Purport. It appears that the great sage Atri Muni had no specific idea of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Of course, he must have been conversant with the Vedic information that there is a Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the creator of the universe, from whom everything emanated, who maintains this created manifestation, and in whom the entire manifestation is conserved after dissolution. Yakova Imani Bhutani, Taittiriya Upanishad 3.1.1. The Vedic mantras give us information of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, so Atri Muni concentrated his mind upon that Supreme Personality of Godhead, even without knowing his name, just to beg from him a child exactly on his level. This kind of devotional service in which knowledge of God's name is lacking is also described in Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord says that 4 kinds of men with backgrounds of pious activities come to him asking for what they need. Atri Muni wanted a son exactly like the Lord, and therefore he is not supposed to have been a pure devotee. Because he had a desire to be fulfilled, and that desire was material, although he wanted a son exactly like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, this desire was material because he did not want the Personality of Godhead himself, but only a child exactly like him. If he had desired the Supreme Personality of Godhead as his child, he would have been completely free of material desires, because he would have wanted the Supreme Absolute Truth. But because he wanted a similar child, his desire was material. Thus, Atri Muni cannot be counted among the pure devotees. Text 21. While Atri Muni was engaged in these severe austerities, a blazing fire came out of his head by virtue of his breathing exercise, and that fire was seen by the 3 principal deities of the 3 worlds. Purport. According to Srila Jiva Goswami, the fire of pranayama is mental satisfaction. That fire was perceived by the Supersoul Vishnu, and thereby Lord Brahma and Shiva also perceived it. Atri Muni, by his breathing exercise, concentrated on the Supersoul, or the Lord of the Universe. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, the Lord of the Universe is Vasudeva, Vasudeva Sharvam Iti, and by the direction of Vasudeva, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva work. Therefore, on the direction of Vasudeva, both Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva perceived the severe penance adopted by Atri Muni, and thus they were pleased to come down, as stated in the next verse. Text 22. At that time the 3 deities approached the hermitage of Atri Muni, accompanied by the denizens of the heavenly planets, such as the celestial beauties, the Gandharvas, the Siddhas, the Vidyaharas, and the Nagas. Thus they entered the ashrama of the great sage, who had become famous by his austerities. Purport. It is advised in the Vedic literatures that one should take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the Lord of the universe and the Master of creation, maintenance, and dissolution. He is known as the Supersoul, and when one worships the Supersoul, all other deities, such as Brahma and Shiva, appear with Lord Vishnu, because they are directed by the Supersoul. Text 23. The sage was standing on one leg, but as soon as he saw that the three deities had appeared before him, he was so pleased to see them all together that despite great difficulty, he approached them on one leg. Text 24. Thereafter he began to offer prayers to the three deities, who were seated on different carriers, a bull, a swan, and Garuda, and who held in their hands a drum, kusha grass, and a discus. The sage offered them his respects by falling down like a stick. Purport. Danda means a long rod, and vat means like. Before a superior, one has to fall down on the ground just like a stick, and this sort of offering of respect is called dandavat. Atri Rishi offered his respect to the three deities in that way. They were identified by their different carriers and different symbolic representations. In that connection, it is stated here that Lord Vishnu was sitting on Garuda, a big aquiline bird, and was carrying in his hand a disc. Brahma was sitting on a swan, and had in his hand kusha grass, and Lord Shiva was sitting on a bull, and carrying in his hand a small drum called a damaru. Atri Rishi recognized them by their symbolic representations and different carriers, and thus he offered them prayers and respects. Text 25. Atri Muni was greatly pleased to see that the three devas were gracious towards him. His eyes were dazzled by the effulgence of their bodies, and therefore he closed his eyes for the time being. Purport. Since the deities were smiling, he could understand that they were pleased with him. Their glaring bodily effulgence was intolerable to his eyes, so he closed them for the time being. Text 26 through 27. But since his heart was already attracted by the deities, somehow or other he gathered his senses, and with folded hands and sweet words, he began to offer prayers to the predominating deities of the universe. The great sage Atri said, O Lord Brahma, Lord Vishnu, and Lord Shiva, you have divided yourself into three bodies by accepting the three modes of material nature, as you do in every millennium for the creation, maintenance, and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. I offer my respectful obeisances unto all of you, and beg to inquire whom of you three I have called by my prayer. Purport. Atri Rishi called for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Jagat Ishvara, the Lord of the universe. The Lord must exist before the creation, otherwise how could he be its Lord? If someone constructs a big building, this indicates that he must have existed before the building was constructed. Therefore the Supreme Lord, the Creator of the universe, must be transcendental to the material modes of nature. But it is known that Vishnu takes charge of the mode of goodness, Brahma takes charge of the mode of passion, and Lord Shiva takes charge of the mode of ignorance. Therefore Atri Muni said that Jagat Ishvara, the Lord of the universe, must be one of you. But since three of you have appeared, I cannot recognize whom I have called. You are all so kind. Please let me know who is actually Jagat Ishvara, the Lord of the universe. In fact, Atri Rishi was doubtful about the constitutional position of the Supreme Lord, Vishnu, but he was quite certain that the Lord of the universe cannot be one of the creatures created by Maya. His very inquiry about whom he had called indicates that he was in doubt about the constitutional position of the Lord. Therefore he prayed to all three, kindly let me know who is the transcendental Lord of the universe. He was certain, of course, that not all of them could be the Lord, but the Lord of the universe was one of the three. Text 28. I called for the Supreme Personality of Godhead, desiring a son like him, and I thought of him only. But although he is far beyond the mental speculation of man, all three of you have come here. Kindly let me know how you have come, for I am greatly bewildered about this. Purport. Atri Muni was confidently aware that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is the Lord of the universe, so he prayed for the one Supreme Lord. He was surprised, therefore, that three of them appeared. Text 29. The great sage Maitreya continued, Upon hearing Atri Muni speak in that way, the three great deities smiled, and they replied in the following sweet words. Text 30. The three deities told Atri Muni, Dear Brahmana, you are perfect in your determination, and therefore, as you have decided, so it will happen. It will not happen otherwise. We are all the same person upon whom you are meditating, and therefore we have all come to you. Purport. Atri Muni unspecifically thought of the personality of Godhead, the Lord of the universe, although he had no clear idea of the Lord of the universe, nor of his specific form. Mahavishnu, from whose breathing millions of universes emanate, and into whom they are again withdrawn, may be accepted as the Lord of the universe. Garbhodakashayi Vishnu, from whose abdomen sprouted the lotus flower, which is the birthplace of Brahma, may also be considered the Lord of the universe. Similarly, Ksirodakashayi Vishnu, who is the supersoul of all living entities, may also be considered the Lord of the universe. Then, under the order of Ksirodakashayi Vishnu, the Vishnu form within the universe, Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva may also be accepted as the lords of the universe. Vishnu is the Lord of the universe because he is its maintainer. Similarly, Brahma creates the different planetary systems and the population, so he also may be considered the Lord of the universe. Or Lord Shiva, who is ultimately the destroyer of the universe, also may be considered its Lord. Therefore, since Atri Muni did not specifically mention whom he wanted, all three, Brahma, Vishnu, and Lord Shiva, came before him. They said, Since you were thinking of having a son exactly like the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Lord of the universe, your determination will be fulfilled. In other words, one's determination is fulfilled according to the strength of one's devotion. As stated in Bhagavad Gita 9.25, Yanti devavrata devan pitrinyanti pitarvrata. If one is attached to a particular demigod, one is promoted to the abode of that demigod. If one is attached to the pitas, or forefathers, one is promoted to their planet. And similarly, if one is attached to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, one is promoted to the abode of Lord Krishna. Atri Muni had no clear conception of the Lord of the universe. Therefore, the three presiding deities, who are actually the lords of the universe, in the three departments of the modes of nature, all came before him. Now, according to the strength of his determination for his son, his desire would be fulfilled by the grace of the Lord. Text 31. You will have sons who will represent a partial manifestation of our potency, and because we desire all good fortune for you, these sons will glorify your reputation throughout the world. Text 32. Thus, while the couple looked on, the three deities Brahma, Vishnu, and Maheshvara disappeared from that place after bestowing upon Atri Muni the benediction. Text 33. Thereafter, from the partial representation of Brahma, the moon god was born of them. From the partial representation of Vishnu, the great mystic Dattatreya was born. And from the partial representation of Shankara, Lord Shiva, Darvasha was born. Now you may hear from me of the many sons of Angira. Text 34. Angira's wife Srada gave birth to 4 daughters named Sinivali, Kuhu, Raka, and Anumati. Text 35. Besides these 4 daughters, she also had another 2 sons. One of them was known as Uttatya, and the other was the learned scholar Brihaspati. Text 36. Pulastya begotten his wife Havirbu, one son of the name Agastya, who in his next birth became Daragni. Besides him, Pulastya begot another very great and saintly son, whose name was Vishrava. Text 37. Vishrava had 2 wives. The first wife was Idavida, from whom Kuvera, the master of all yakshas, was born, and the next wife was named Kesini, from whom 3 sons were born, Ravana, Kumbhakarna, and Vibhishana. Text 38. Gati, the wife of the sage Pulaha, gave birth to 3 sons, named Karmareshta, Variyan, and Sahishnu, and all of them were great sages. Purport. Gati, the wife of Pulaha, was the 5th daughter of Kardama Muni. She was very faithful to her husband, and all her sons were as good as he. Text 39. Kratu's wife Kriya gave birth to 60,000 great sages, named the Valakilyas. All these sages were greatly advanced in spiritual knowledge, and their bodies were illuminated by such knowledge. Purport: Kriya was the sixth daughter of Kardama Muni, and she produced 60,000 sages, who were known as the Valakilyas, because they all retired from family life as Vanaprashthas. Text 40. The great sage Vasishtha begot in his wife Urja, sometimes called Arundhati, 7 spotlessly great sages, headed by the sage named Chitraketu. Text 41. The names of these 7 sages are as follows: Chitraketu, Surochi, Varaja, Mitra, Ulbana, Vasuburdhyana, and Dyuman. Some other very prominent sons were born from Vasishtha's other wife. Purport: Urja, who is sometimes known as Arundhati and was the wife of Vasishtha, was the 9th daughter of Kardama Muni. Text 42. Chiti, wife of the sage Atharva, gave birth to a son named Ashvashara by accepting a great vow called Dadyancha. Now you may hear from me about the descendants of the sage Bhrigu. Purport: the wife of Atharva, known as Chiti, is also known as Shanti. She was the 8th daughter of Kardama Muni. Text 43. The sage Bhrigu was highly fortunate. In his wife, known as Khyati, he begot 2 sons, named Datta and Vidata, and 1 daughter named Sri, who was very much devoted to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 44. The sage Meru had 2 daughters named Ayati and Niyati, whom he gave in charity to Datta and Vidata. Ayati and Niyati gave birth to 2 sons, Merkanda and Prana. Text 45. From Merkanda, Markandeya Muni was born, and from Prana, the sage Vedashira, whose son was Usana, Sukracharya, also known as Kavi. Thus Kavi also belonged to the descendants of the Bhrigu dynasty. Text 46 through 47. My dear Vidura, the population of the universe was thus increased by the descendants of these sages and the daughters of Kardama. Anyone who hears the descriptions of this dynasty with faith will be relieved from all sinful reactions. Another of Manu's daughters, known as Prashuti, married the son of Brahma, named Daksha. Text 48. Daksha begot 16 very beautiful daughters, with lotus-like eyes, in his wife Prashuti. Of these 16 daughters, 13 were given in marriage to Dharma, and 1 daughter was given to Agni. Text 49 through 52. One of the remaining 2 daughters was given in charity to the Pitraloka, where she resides very amicably, and the other was given to Lord Shiva, who is the deliverer of sinful persons from material entanglement. The names of the 13 daughters of Daksha, who were given to Dharma, are Sraddha, Maitri, Daya, Shanti, Tushti, Pushti, Kriya, Unnati, Buddhi, Medha, Titiksha, Pri, and Murti. These 13 daughters produced the following sons. Sraddha gave birth to Subha, Maitri produced Prasada, Daya gave birth to Abhaya, Shanti gave birth to Shuka, Tushti gave birth to Muda, Pushti gave birth to Smaya, Kriya gave birth to Yoga, Unnati gave birth to Darpa, Buddhi gave birth to Artha, Medha gave birth to Smriti, Titiksha gave birth to Kshema, and Hri gave birth to Prasraya. Murti, a reservoir of all respectable qualities, gave birth to Sri Narayana, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 53. On the occasion of the appearance of Narayana, the entire world was full of joy. Everyone's mind became tranquil, and thus in all directions the air, the rivers, and the mountains became pleasant. Text 54 through 55. In the heavenly planets, bands began to play, and they showered flowers from the sky. The pacified sages chanted Vedic prayers. The denizens of heaven, known as the Gandharvas and the Kinnaras, sang. The beautiful damsels of the heavenly planets danced, and in this way, at the time of the appearance of Narayana, all signs of good fortune were visible. Just at that time, great demigods like Brahma also offered their respectful prayers. Text 56. The demigods said, "Let us offer our respectful obeisances unto the transcendental personality of Godhead, who created as his external energy this cosmic manifestation, which is situated in him as the air and clouds are situated in space, and who has now appeared in the form of Narayana Rishi in the house of Dharma." Purport. The universal form of the Lord is the cosmic manifestation, which is an exhibition of the external energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In space there are innumerable varieties of planets, and also the air, and in the air there are variously colored clouds, and sometimes we see airplanes running from one place to another. Thus the entire cosmic manifestation is full of variety, but actually that variety is a manifestation of the external energy of the Supreme Lord, and the energy is situated in him. Now the Lord himself, after manifesting his energy, appeared within the creation of his energy, which is simultaneously one with and different from himself, and therefore the demigods offered their respects to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who manifests himself in such varieties. There are some philosophers called non-dualists who, because of their impersonal conception, think that varieties are false. In this verse it is specifically stated, "Yo mayaya virachitam." This indicates that the varieties are a manifestation of the energy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Thus, because the energy is non-different from the Godhead, the varieties are also factual. The material varieties may be temporary, but they are not false. They are a reflection of the spiritual varieties. Here the word pratichakshanaya, "there are varieties," announces the glories of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who appeared as Narayana Rishi, and who is the origin of all varieties of material nature. Text 57. Let that Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is understood by truly authorized Vedic literature, and who has created peace and prosperity to destroy all calamities of the created world, be kind enough to bestow his glance upon the demigods. His merciful glance can supersede the beauty of the spotless lotus flower, which is the home of the goddess of fortune. Purport. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the origin of the cosmic manifestation, is covered by the wonderful activities of material nature, just as outer space or the illumination of the sun and moon is sometimes covered by clouds or dust. It is very difficult to find the origin of the cosmic manifestation. Therefore, material scientists conclude that nature is the ultimate cause of all manifestations. But from Shastra or authentic literature like Bhagavad Gita and other Vedic scriptures, we understand that behind this wonderful cosmic manifestation is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And in order to maintain the regular procedures of the cosmic manifestation and to be visible to the eyes of persons who are in the mode of goodness, the Lord appears. He is the cause of the creation and dissolution of the cosmic manifestation. The demigods therefore prayed for his merciful glance upon them in order to be blessed. Text 58. Maitreya said, "O Vidura, thus the demigods worshipped with prayers the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appearing as the sage Narayana. The Lord glanced upon them with mercy, and then departed for Gandhamadana hill." Text 59. That Narayana Rishi, who is a partial expansion of Krishna, has now appeared in the dynasties of Yadu and Kuru, in the forms of Krishna and Arjuna respectively, to mitigate the burden of the world. Purport. Narayana is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and Nara is a part of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayana. Thus the energy and the energetic together are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Maitreya informed Vidura that Nara, the portion of Narayana, had appeared in the family of the Kurus, and that Narayana, the plenary expansion of Krishna, had come as Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, with the purpose of delivering suffering humanity from the pangs of material burdens. In other words, Narayana Rishi was now present in the world in the forms of Krishna and Arjuna. Text 60. The predominating deity of fire begot in his wife Svaha 3 children named Pavaka, Pavamana, and Suchi, who exist by eating the oblations offered to the fire of sacrifice. Purport. After describing the descendants of the 13 wives of Dharma, who were all daughters of Daksha, Maitreya now describes the 14th daughter of Daksha, Svaha, and her 3 sons. Oblations offered in the sacrificial fire are meant for the demigods, and on behalf of the demigods, the 3 sons of Agni and Svaha, namely Pavaka, Pavamana, and Suchi, accept the oblations. Text 61. From those 3 sons, another 45 descendants were generated, who are also fire gods. The total number of fire gods is therefore 49, including the fathers and the grandfather. Purport. The grandfather is Agni, and the sons are Pavaka, Pavamana, and Suchi. Counting these 4 plus 45 grandsons, there are altogether 49 different fire gods. Text 62. These 49 fire gods are the beneficiaries of the oblations offered in the Vedic sacrificial fire by impersonalist Brahmanas. Purport. Impersonalists who perform Vedic fruitive sacrifices are attracted to the various fire gods and offer oblations in their name. The 49 fire gods are described herewith. Text 63. The Agnisvatas, the Barisadas, the Samyas, and the Ajapas are the Pittas. They are either Sagnika or Niragnika. The wife of all these Pittas is Svadha, who is the daughter of King Daksha. Text 64. Svadha, who was offered to the Pittas, begot 2 daughters named Vayuna and Darini, both of whom were impersonalists and were expert in transcendental and Vedic knowledge. Text 65. The 16th daughter, whose name was Sati, was the wife of Lord Shiva. She could not produce a child, although she was always faithfully engaged in the service of her husband. Text 66. The reason is that Sati's father, Daksha, used to rebuke Lord Shiva in spite of Shiva's faultlessness. Consequently, before attaining a mature age, Sati gave up her body by dint of yogic mystic power. Purport. Lord Shiva, being the head of all mystic yogis, never even constructed a home for his residence. Sati was the daughter of a great king, Daksha, and because his youngest daughter Sati selected as her husband Lord Shiva, King Daksha was not very much satisfied with her. Therefore, whenever she met her father, he unnecessarily criticized her husband, although Lord Shiva was faultless. Because of this, before attaining a mature age, Sati gave up the body given by her father, Daksha, and therefore she could not produce a child. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta Purports of the 4th Canto, 1st chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Genealogical Table of the Daughters of Manu. Chapter 2. Daksha curses Lord Shiva. Text 1. Vidura inquired, why was Daksha, who was so affectionate towards his daughter, envious of Lord Shiva, who is the best among the gentle? Why did he neglect his daughter Sati? Purport. In the 2nd chapter of the 4th Canto, the cause of the dissension between Lord Shiva and Daksha, which was due to a great sacrifice arranged by Daksha for the pacification of the entire universe, is explained. Lord Shiva is described here as the best of the gentle because he is not envious of anyone. He is equal to all living entities, and all other good qualities are present in his personality. The word Shiva means all auspicious. No one can be an enemy of Lord Shiva's, for he is so peaceful and renounced that he does not even construct a house for his residence, but lives underneath a tree, always detached from all worldly things. The personality of Lord Shiva symbolizes the best of gentleness. Why then was Daksha, who offered his beloved daughter to such a gentle personality, inimical towards Lord Shiva so intensely that Sati, the daughter of Daksha and wife of Lord Shiva, gave up her body? Text 2. Lord Shiva, the spiritual master of the entire world, is free from enmity, is a peaceful personality, and is always satisfied in himself. He is the greatest among the demigods. How is it possible that Daksha could be inimical towards such an auspicious personality? Purport. Lord Shiva is described here as Karacharaguru, the spiritual master of all animate and inanimate objects. He is sometimes known as Bhutanatha, which means the worshipable deity of the dull-headed. Bhuta is also sometimes taken to indicate the ghosts. Lord Shiva takes charge of reformed persons who are ghosts and demons, not to speak of others who are godly. Therefore he is the spiritual master of everyone, both the dull and demoniac and the highly learned Vaishnavas. It is also stated, Vaishnavam Yata Shambho. Shambho, Lord Shiva, is the greatest of all Vaishnavas. On one hand, he is the worshipable object of the dull demons, and on the other, he is the best of all Vaishnavas, or devotees, and he has a sampradaya called the Rudra Sampradaya. Even if he is an enemy or is sometimes angry, such a personality cannot be the object of envy. So Vidura, in astonishment, asked why he was taken as such, especially by Daksha. Daksha is also not an ordinary person. He is a Prajapati, in charge of fathering population, and all his daughters are highly elevated, especially Sati. The word Sati means the most chaste. Whenever there is consideration of chastity, Sati, the wife of Lord Shiva, and daughter of Daksha, is considered first. Vidura, therefore, was astonished. Daksha is such a great man, he thought, and is the father of Sati, and Lord Shiva is the spiritual master of everyone. How then could there possibly be so much enmity between them that Sati, the most chaste goddess, could give up her body because of their quarrel? Text 3. My dear Maitreya, to part with one's life is very difficult. Would you kindly explain to me how such a son-in-law and father-in-law could quarrel so bitterly that the great goddess Sati could give up her life? Text 4. The sage Maitreya said, in a former time the leaders of the universal creation performed a great sacrifice in which all the great sages, philosophers, demigods, and fire gods assembled with their followers. Purport. Upon being asked by Vidura, the sage Maitreya began to explain the cause of the misunderstanding between Lord Shiva and Daksha, because of which the goddess Sati gave up her body. Thus begins the history of a great sacrifice performed by the leaders of the universal creation, namely Marichi, Daksha, and Vashishta. These great personalities arranged for a great sacrifice, for which demigods like Indra and the fire gods assembled with their followers. Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva were also present. Text 5. When Daksha, the leader of the Prajapatis, entered that assembly, his personal bodily luster, as bright as the effulgence of the sun, the entire assembly was illuminated, and all the assembled personalities became insignificant in his presence. Text 6. Influenced by his personal bodily luster, all the fire gods and other participants in that great assembly, with the exceptions of Lord Brahma and Lord Shiva, gave up their own sitting places and stood in respect for Daksha. Text 7. Daksha was adequately welcomed by the president of the great assembly, Lord Brahm. After offering Lord Brahm respect, Daksha, by the order of Brahma, properly took his seat. Text 8. Before taking his seat, however, Daksha was very much offended to see Lord Shiva sitting and not showing him any respect. At that time, Daksha became greatly angry, and his eyes glowing, he began to speak very strongly against Lord Shiva. Purport. Lord Shiva, being the son-in-law of Daksha, was expected to show his father-in-law respect by standing with the others, but because Lord Brahm and Lord Shiva are the principal demigods, their positions are greater than Daksha's. Daksha, however, could not tolerate this, and he took it as an insult by his son-in-law. Previously also, he was not very much satisfied with Lord Shiva, for Shiva looked very poor and was niggardly in dress. Text 9. All sages, brahmanas, and fire gods present, please hear me with attention, for I speak about the manners of gentle persons. I do not speak out of ignorance or envy. Purport. In speaking against Lord Shiva, Daksha tried to pacify the assembly by presenting in a very tactful way that he was going to speak about the manners of gentle persons, although naturally this might affect some unmannerly upstarts, and the assembly might be unhappy because they did not want even unmannerly persons to be offended. In other words, he was in complete knowledge that he was speaking against Lord Shiva in spite of Shiva's spotless character. As far as envy is concerned, from the very beginning he was envious of Lord Shiva. Therefore he could not distinguish his own particular envy. Although he spoke like a man in ignorance, he wanted to cover his statements by saying that he was not speaking for impudent and envious reasons. Text 10. Shiva has spoiled the name and fame of the governors of the universe and has polluted the path of gentle manners. Because he is shameless, he does not know how to act. Purport. Daksha wanted to impress upon the minds of all the great sages assembled in that meeting that Shiva, being one of the demigods, had ruined the good reputations of all the demigods by his unmannerly behavior. The words used against Lord Shiva by Daksha can also be understood in a different way, in a good sense. For example, he stated that Shiva is Yashodhana, which means one who spoils name and fame. So this can also be interpreted to mean that he was so famous that his name killed all the other fame. Again, Daksha used the word Nirapatrapa, which also can be used in two senses. One sense is one who is stunted, and another sense is one who is the maintainer of persons who have no other shelter. Generally, Lord Shiva is known as the Lord of the Bhutas, or lower grade of living creatures. They take shelter of Lord Shiva because he is very kind to everyone and is very quickly satisfied. Therefore he is called Ashatosha. To such men who cannot approach other demigods or Vishnu, Lord Shiva gives shelter. Therefore the word Nirapatrapa can be used in that sense. Text 11. He has already accepted himself as my subordinate by marrying my daughter in the presence of fire and brahmanas. He has married my daughter, who is equal to Gayatri, and has pretended to be just like an honest person. Purport. Daksha's statement that Lord Shiva pretended to be an honest person means that Shiva was dishonest, because in spite of accepting the position of Daksha's son-in-law, he was not respectful to Daksha. Text 12. He has eyes like a monkey's, yet he has married my daughter, whose eyes are just like those of a deer cub. Nevertheless, he did not stand up to receive me, nor did he think it fit to welcome me with sweet words. Text 13. I had no desire to give my daughter to this person who has broken all rules of civility. Because of not observing the required rules and regulations, he is impure, but I was obliged to hand over my daughter to him, just as one teaches the messages of the Vedas to a Sudra. Purport. A Sudra is forbidden to take lessons from the Vedas because a Sudra, due to his unclean habits, is not worthy to hear such instructions. This restriction that, unless one has acquired the Brahminical qualifications, one should not read the Vedic literatures, is like the restriction that a law student should not enter a law college unless he has been graduated from all lower grades. According to the estimation of Daksha, Shiva was unclean in habits and not worthy to have the hand of his daughter Sati, who was so enlightened, beautiful, and chaste. The word used in this connection is binasitave, which refers to one who has broken all the regulations for good behavior by not following the Vedic principles. In other words, according to Daksha, the entire transaction of the marriage of his daughter with Shiva was not in order. Text 14 through 15. He lives in filthy places like crematoriums, and his companions are the ghosts and demons. Naked like a madman, sometimes laughing and sometimes crying, he smears crematorium ashes all over his body. He does not bathe regularly, and he ornaments his body with a garland of skulls and bones. Therefore only in name is he Shiva, or auspicious. Actually, he is the most mad and inauspicious creature. Thus he is very dear to crazy beings in the gross mode of ignorance, and he is their leader. Purport. Those who do not regularly bathe are supposed to be in association with ghosts and crazy creatures. Lord Shiva appeared to be like that, but his name Shiva is actually fitting, for he is very kind to persons who are in the darkness of the mode of ignorance, such as unclean drunkards who do not regularly bathe. Lord Shiva is so kind that he gives shelter to such creatures and gradually elevates them to spiritual consciousness. Although it is very difficult to raise such creatures to spiritual understanding, Lord Shiva takes charge of them, and therefore, as stated in the Vedas, Lord Shiva is all auspicious. Thus by his association, even such fallen souls can be elevated. Sometimes it is seen that great personalities meet with fallen souls, not for any personal interest, but for the benefit of those souls. In the creation of the Lord there are different kinds of living creatures. Some of them are in the mode of goodness, some are in the mode of passion, and some are in the mode of ignorance. Lord Vishnu takes charge of persons who are advanced Krishna-conscious Vaishnavas, and Lord Brahma takes charge of persons who are very much attached to material activities. But Lord Shiva is so kind that he takes charge of persons who are in gross ignorance, and whose behavior is lower than that of the animals. Therefore Lord Shiva is especially called auspicious. Text 16. On the request of Lord Brahma, I handed over my chaste daughter to him, although he is devoid of all cleanliness, and his heart is filled with nasty things. Purport. It is the duty of parents to hand over their daughters to suitable persons, just befitting their family tradition in cleanliness, gentle behavior, wealth, social position, etc. Daksha was repentant that, on the request of Brahma, who was his father, he had handed over his daughters to a person who, according to his calculation, was nasty. He was so angry that he did not acknowledge that the request was from his father. Instead, he referred to Brahma as Parameshti, the supreme teacher in the universe. Because of his temperament of gross anger, he was not even prepared to accept Brahma as his father. In other words, he accused even Brahma of being less intelligent because he had advised Daksha to hand over his beautiful daughter to such a nasty fellow. In anger one forgets everything, and thus Daksha, in anger, not only accused the great Lord Shiva, but criticized his own father, Lord Brahma, for his not very astute advice that Daksha hand over his daughter to Lord Shiva. Text 17. The sage Maitreya continued, Thus Daksha, seeing Lord Shiva sitting as if against him, washed his hands and mouth and cursed him in the following words. Text 18. The demigods are eligible to share in the oblations of sacrifice, but Lord Shiva, who is the lowest of all the demigods, should not have a share. Purport. Because of this curse, Shiva was deprived of his share in the oblations of Vedic sacrifices. It was due to the curse of Daksha. Sri Vishwanatha Chakravarti comments in this connection that Lord Shiva was saved from the calamity of taking part with other demigods, who were all materialistic. Lord Shiva is the greatest devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and it is not fitting for him to eat or sit with materialistic persons like the demigods. Thus the curse of Daksha was indirectly a blessing, for Shiva would not have to eat or sit with other demigods who were too materialistic. There is a practical example set for us by Garakishora Dashababaji Maharaj, who used to sit on the side of a latrine to chant Hare Krishna. Many materialistic persons used to come and bother him and disturb his daily routine of chanting, so to avoid their company, he used to sit by the side of a latrine, where materialistic persons would not go because of the filth and the obnoxious smell. However, Gorakishora Dasha Babaji Maharaj was so great that he was accepted as the spiritual master of such a great personality, as His Divine Grace, or Vishnupada Sri Srimad Bhaktivedanta Sarasvati Goswami Maharaj. The conclusion is that Lord Shiva behaved in his own way to avoid materialistic persons who might disturb him in his prosecution of devotional service. Text 19. Maitreya continued, My dear Vidura, in spite of the requests of all the members of the sacrificial assembly, Daksha, in great anger, cursed Lord Shiva, and then left the assembly and went back to his home. Purport. Anger is so detrimental that even a great personality like Daksha, out of anger, left the arena where Brahma was presiding, and all the great sages and pious and saintly persons were assembled. All of them requested him not to leave, but, infuriated, he left, thinking that the auspicious place was not fit for him. Puffed up by his exalted position, he thought that no one was greater than he in argument. It appears that all the members of the assembly, including Lord Brahma, requested him not to be angry and leave their company, but in spite of all these requests, he left. That is the effect of cruel anger. In Bhagavad Gita, therefore, it is advised that one who desires to make tangible advancement in spiritual consciousness must avoid three things: lust, anger, and the mode of passion. Actually, we can see that lust, anger, and passion make a man crazy, even though he be as great as Daksha. The very name Daksha suggests that he was expert in all material activities. But still, because of his aversion toward such a saintly personality as Shiva, he was attacked by these three enemies: anger, lust, and passion. Lord Chaitanya therefore advised that one be very careful not to offend Vaishnavas. He compared offenses toward a Vaishnava to a mad elephant. As a mad elephant can do anything horrible, so when a person offends a Vaishnava, he can perform any abominable action. Text 20. Upon understanding that Lord Shiva had been cursed, Nandishvara, one of Lord Shiva's principal associates, became greatly angry. His eyes became red, and he prepared to curse Daksha and all the brahmanas present there, who had tolerated Daksha's cursing Shiva in harsh words. Purport. There is a long-standing dissension among some of the neophyte Vaishnavas and Shaivites. They are always at loggerheads. When Daksha cursed Lord Shiva in harsh words, some of the brahmanas present might have enjoyed it because some brahmanas do not very much admire Lord Shiva. This is due to their ignorance of Lord Shiva's position. Nandishvara was affected by the cursing, but he did not follow the example of Lord Shiva, who was also present there. Although Lord Shiva could also have cursed Daksha in a similar way, he was silent and tolerant, but Nandishvara, his follower, was not tolerant. Of course, as a follower, it was right for him not to tolerate an insult to his master, but he should not have cursed the brahmanas who were present. The entire issue was so complicated that those who were not strong enough forgot their positions, and thus cursing and counter-cursing went on in that great assembly. In other words, the material field is so unsteady that even personalities like Nandishvara, Daksha, and many of the brahmanas present were infected by the atmosphere of anger. Text 21. Anyone who has accepted Daksha as the most important personality and neglected Lord Shiva because of envy is less intelligent, and because of visualizing in duality will be bereft of transcendental knowledge. Purport. The first curse of Nandishvara was that anyone supporting Daksha was foolishly identifying himself with the body, and therefore because Daksha had no transcendental knowledge, supporting him would deprive one of transcendental knowledge. Daksha, Nandishvara said, identified himself with the body, like other materialistic persons, and was trying to derive all kinds of facilities in relationship with the body. He had excessive attachment for the body, and in relation to the body, with wife, children, home, and other such things, which are different from the soul. Therefore, Nandishvara's curse was that anyone who supported Daksha would be bereft of transcendental knowledge of the soul, and thus also be deprived of knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Text 22. Pretentiously religious householder life, in which one is attracted to material happiness, and thus also attracted to the superficial explanation of the Vedas, robs one of all intelligence, and attaches one to fruitive activities as all in all. Purport. Persons who identify with bodily existence are attached to the fruitive activities described in the Vedic literature. For example, in the Vedas it is said that one who observes the Chaturmasya vow will attain eternal happiness in the heavenly kingdom. In Bhagavad Gita it is said that this flowery language of the Vedas mostly attracts persons who identify with the body. To them such happiness as that of the heavenly kingdom is everything. They do not know that beyond that is the spiritual kingdom, or kingdom of God, and they have no knowledge that one can go there. Thus they are bereft of transcendental knowledge. Such persons are very careful in observing the rules and regulations of household life in order to be promoted in the next life to the moon or other heavenly planets. It is stated here that such persons are attracted to Gramya Sukha, which means material happiness, without knowledge of eternal blissful spiritual life. Text 23. Daksha has accepted the body as all in all. Therefore, since he has forgotten the Vishnupada, or Vishnugati, and is attached to sex life only, within a short time he will have the face of a goat. Text 24. Those who have become as dull as matter by cultivating materialistic education and intelligence are nesciently involved in fruitive activities. Such men have purposely insulted Lord Shiva. May they continue in the cycle of repeated birth and death. Purport. The three curses mentioned above are sufficient to make one as dull as stone, void of spiritual knowledge, and preoccupied with materialistic education, which is nescience. After uttering these curses, Nandishvara then cursed the Brahmanas to continue in the cycle of birth and death because of their supporting Daksha and blaspheming Lord Shiva. Text 25. May those who are envious of Lord Shiva, being attracted by the flowery language of the enchanting Vedic promises, and who have thus become dull, always remain attached to fruitive activities. Purport. The Vedic promises of elevation to higher planets for a better standard of materialistic life are compared to flowery language, because in a flower there is certainly an aroma, but that aroma does not last for a very long time. In a flower there is honey, but that honey is not eternal. Text 26. These Brahmanas take to education, austerity, and vows only for the purpose of maintaining the body. They shall be devoid of discrimination between what to eat and what not to eat. They will acquire money, begging from door to door, simply for the satisfaction of the body. Purport. The third curse inflicted by Nandishvara on the Brahmanas who supported Daksha is completely functioning in the age of Kali. The so-called Brahmanas are no longer interested in understanding the nature of the Supreme Brahman, although a Brahmana means one who has attained knowledge about Brahman. In the Vedanta Sutra also it is stated, Atato Brahma Jijnasa. This human form of life is meant for realization of the Supreme Brahman, the Absolute Truth, or in other words, human life is meant for one's elevation to the post of a Brahmana. Unfortunately, the modern Brahmanas, or so-called Brahmanas, who come in originally Brahminical families, have left their own occupational duties, but they do not allow others to occupy the posts of Brahmanas. The qualifications for Brahmanas are described in the scriptures, in Srimad Bhagavatam, Bhagavad Gita, and all other Vedic literatures. Brahmana is not a hereditary title or position. If someone from a non-Brahmana family, for example one born in a family of Sudras, tries to become a Brahmana by being properly qualified under the instruction of a bona fide spiritual master, these so-called Brahmanas will object. Such Brahmanas, having been cursed by Nandishvara, are actually in a position where they have no discrimination between edibles and non-edibles, and simply live to maintain the perishable material body and its family. Such fallen conditioned souls are not worthy to be called Brahmanas, but in Kali Yuga they claim to be Brahmanas, and if a person actually tries to attain the Brahminical qualifications, they try to hinder his progress. This is the situation in the present age. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu condemned this principle very strongly. During his conversation with Ramananda Raya, he said that regardless of whether a person is born in a Brahmana family or Sudra family, regardless of whether he is a householder or a sannyasi, if he knows the science of Krishna, he must be a spiritual master. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had many so-called Sudra disciples, like Haridasa Thakura and Ramananda Raya. Even the Goswamis, who were principal students of Lord Chaitanya, were also ostracized from Brahmana society, but Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, by his grace, made them first-class Vaishnavas. Text 27. When all the hereditary Brahmanas were thus cursed by Nandishvara, the sage Bhrigu, as a reaction, condemned the followers of Lord Shiva with this very strong Brahminical curse. Purport. The word Dharatyaya is particularly used in reference to a Brahmadanda, or curse by a Brahmana. A curse by a Brahmana is very strong, therefore it is called Dharatyaya, or insurmountable. As the Lord states in Bhagavad Gita, the stringent laws of nature are insurmountable. Similarly, if a curse is uttered by a Brahmana, that curse is also insurmountable. But Bhagavad Gita also says that the curses or benedictions of the material world are, after all, material creations. The Chaitanya Charitamrita confirms that that which is accepted in this material world to be a benediction and that which is taken to be a curse are both on the same platform because they are material. To get out of this material contamination, one should take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, as recommended in Bhagavad Gita 7:14. Mam eveye prapadyante mayam etam tarantite. The best path is to transcend all material curses and benedictions and take shelter of the Supreme Lord, Krishna, and remain in a transcendental position. Persons who have taken shelter of Krishna are always peaceful. They are never cursed by anyone, nor do they attempt to curse anyone. That is a transcendental position. Text 28. One who takes a vow to satisfy Lord Shiva, or who follows such principles, will certainly become an atheist and be diverted from transcendental scriptural injunctions. Purport. It is sometimes seen that devotees of Lord Shiva imitate the characteristics of Lord Shiva. For example, Lord Shiva drank an ocean of poison, so some of the followers of Lord Shiva imitate him and try to take intoxicants like ganja, marijuana. Here, the curse is that if someone follows such principles, he must become an infidel and turn against the principles of Vedic regulation. It is said that such devotees of Lord Shiva will be Sachastra Paripantina, which means opposed to the conclusion of Shastra or scripture. This is confirmed in the Padma Purana also. Lord Shiva was ordered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead to preach the impersonal, or Mayavada philosophy, for a particular purpose, just as Lord Buddha preached the philosophy of voidness for particular purposes mentioned in the Shastras. Sometimes it is necessary to preach a philosophical doctrine that is against the Vedic conclusion. In the Shiva Purana, it is stated that Lord Shiva said to Parvati that in the Kali Yuga, in the body of a Brahmana, he would preach the Mayavada philosophy. Thus, it is generally found that the worshippers of Lord Shiva are Mayavadi followers. Lord Shiva himself says, Mayavadam asachastram. Asatshastra, as explained here, means the doctrine of Mayavada, impersonalism, or becoming one with the Supreme. Bhargamuni cursed that persons who worshipped Lord Shiva would become followers of this Mayavada Asatshastra, which attempts to establish that the Supreme Personality of Godhead is impersonal. Besides that, among the worshippers of Lord Shiva, there is a section who live a devilish life. Srimad Bhagavatam and Narada Pancharatra are authorized scriptures that are considered Sat-shastra, or scriptures which lead one to the path of God realization. Asat-shastras are just the opposite. Text 29. Those who vow to worship Lord Shiva are so foolish that they imitate him by keeping long hair on their heads. When initiated into worship of Lord Shiva, they prefer to live on wine, flesh, and other such things. Purport. Indulging in wine and meat, keeping long hair on one's head, not bathing daily, and smoking ganja, marijuana, are some of the habits which are accepted by foolish creatures who do not have regulated lives. By such behavior, one becomes devoid of transcendental knowledge. In the initiation into the Shiva mantra, there are mudrakashtaka, in which it is sometimes recommended that one take his sitting place on the vagina and thus desire nirvana, or dissolution of existence. In that process of worship, wine is needed, or sometimes, in place of wine, palm tree juice, which is converted into an intoxicant. This is also offered according to Shiva Agama, a scripture on the method of worshipping Lord Shiva. Text 30. Bhargamuni continued, since you blaspheme the Vedas and the Brahmanas, who are followers of the Vedic principles, it is understood that you have already taken shelter of the doctrine of atheism. Purport. Bhargamuni, in cursing Nandishvara, said that not only would they be degraded as atheists because of this curse, but that they had already fallen to the standard of atheism because they had blasphemed the Vedas, which are the source of human civilization. Human civilization is based on the qualitative divisions of social order, namely the intelligent class, the martial class, the productive class, and the laborer class. The Vedas provide the right direction for advancing in spiritual cultivation and economic development, and regulating the principle of sense gratification, so that ultimately one may be liberated from material contamination to his real state of spiritual identification, Aham Brahmasmi. As long as one is in the contamination of material existence, one changes bodies from the aquatics up to the position of Brahma, but the human form of life is the highest perfectional life in the material world. The Vedas give directions by which to elevate oneself in the next life. The Vedas are the mother for such instructions, and the Brahmanas, or persons who are in knowledge of the Vedas, are the father. Thus, if one blasphemes the Vedas and Brahmanas, naturally one goes down to the status of atheism. The exact word used in Sanskrit is Nastika, which refers to one who does not believe in the Vedas, but manufactures some concocted system of religion. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu has said that the followers of the Buddhist system of religion are Nastikas. In order to establish his doctrine of nonviolence, Lord Buddha flatly refused to believe in the Vedas, and thus, later on, Shankaracharya stopped this system of religion in India and forced it to go outside India. Here it is stated, Brahmacha Brahmanan. Brahma means the Vedas. Aham Brahmasmi means, I am in full knowledge. The Vedic assertion is that one should think that he is Brahman, for actually he is Brahman. If Brahma, or the Vedic spiritual science, is condemned, and the masters of the spiritual science, the Brahmanas, are condemned, then where does human civilization stand? Bhurgamuni said, it is not due to my cursing that you shall become atheists. You are already situated in the principle of atheism. Therefore you are condemned. Text 31. The Vedas give the eternal regulative principles for auspicious advancement in human civilization, which have been rigidly followed in the past. The strong evidence of this principle is the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is called Janardana, the well-wisher of all living entities. Purport. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, has claimed that he is the father of all living entities, regardless of form. There are 8,400,000 different species of life forms, and Lord Krishna claims that he is the father of all.